Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Augmented Reality Experience, implementing the next generation of AR into applications from education to entertainment and games. My name is Bill Newell. I'm the CEO of North-South Studios. We're a content and software development company focused on augmented reality. We got introduced to augmented reality back in 2008, collaborating with another company on visual recognition. And ever since, we were fascinated by the potential and possibilities that we saw on this technology. So last year, after many rounds of testing, debugging, and prototypes, we were able to launch our very first product. And it was a small product. It was a pre-K book for kids. It's called ABC Animals, Alphabet in Motion. And that book kind of opened the door to us to see how consumers would receive our product. This year, we did a soft launch, or a beta launch perhaps, of a new platform named Hoodoo. And Hoodoo is designed to help marketeers, advertisers, education, and commerce to be able to create AR experiences easily and affordably. Hoodoo will go to his official launch, hopefully this coming month of July. And we're very excited about that. It is amazing to see the progress of augmented reality over the past 18 months. 18 months ago, all the talk was about VR and hardly about AR. And whether you believe the different forecast of 70 billion, 80 billion, 120. We're up to 133, I think I have the very last count. Whatever it is, I think that we can all agree that augmented reality indeed is going to change the way we work, the way we play, the way we learn, and probably just about everything else. But the concept of augmented reality has actually been with us for a lot longer than you would think. Augmented reality has been in our minds, according to this chart, since the 1900s. So today, we're going to talk about the current state of augmented reality, and we're going to discuss distribution, we're going to discuss HMDs, eyewear, tips to make AR content, market opportunities, and the future. And hopefully we'll get through all of this agenda, or as far as we can. And we're going to do so with the help of a great group of experts who are currently leaders in the AR market. So let's meet our panel, and let's start with Tom at the very end.
All right, so I'm Tom Wesselman, and I work for Plantronics. We make headsets, which are used primarily today for communicating with people. I run the software group at Plantronics, and we're kind of starting from the other end, not so much the hardware, but the person, and how do people communicate in the natural world when they move around it, right? And certainly our eyes are a big part of that and augmenting that vision, but also speech and hearing. And so we want to augment that in the best possible way. And so we're looking at basically building a platform in the web to let any application talk to you and reach out to you, and you to reach out to it, so that we can use our speech not only to communicate with other people, but to all the things around us in the world as we move through it.
Thank you. Eric?
Hi, I'm Eric Mizufuka with Epson America. Most people know Epson best for printers, but we are also a world leader in projection technology. So what I'm showing off here is our Moverio BT300. It's our third generation pair of augmented reality glasses. So think of being able to render 3D digital content in the real world. As I mentioned, third generation, so we've actually had commercially available product for over 6 years. Big target for Epson is not only focusing on where the market's going to be in 3 to 5 years, but we actually have real consumer opportunities and applications that we're implementing in kind of large ways today. This pair of glasses, it's not available for pre-order. You can go on Amazon and purchase them.
Thank you, Eric. Mike?
Yeah, hi, Mike Hildebrand. I work for Daiquiri. Daiquiri is a I call us an augmented reality technology company, really. We're really a core computer vision company and optics company, and we've wrapped that into several products. The Daiquiri Smart Helmet is what we're best known for. We announced Daiquiri Smart Glasses this CES. We'll be shipping those at scale later this year. We've just announced a big partnership with Dell, and they'll be helping us bring enterprise AR to the masses, and looking forward to seeing the industry grow and talking with these gentlemen up here today.
Thank you. Michael?
Hi, everybody. I'm Michael Leventhal. I am a partner at the law firm of Holmes Weinberg. I'm a business lawyer and advisor in the intellectual property industries, specialize in AR and VR these days, what I like to call mediated reality. So what I do is I do a lot of work with in the intellectual property area, a lot of corporate analysis, business transactions, and all that sort of stuff to kind of guide companies through all of the legal challenges. And I work with a lot of startups, and I work with a lot of more mature companies. Most recently, I was a VP of business and legal at Magic Leap for a few years. I worked at Magic Leap with Magic Leap from about 2011 on. I wore a few different hats over there. I was also the head of the music business, or the music vertical, and did a bunch of business development over there. In the early days, you do a lot of different things at the same time. So now, these days, I work with a lot of content creators and a lot of people who are developing the underlying technologies that go into the AR and VR platforms, whether that is machine vision or artificial intelligence or spatialized sound and that sort of thing. So I'm kind of busy with a lot of companies who are working in this area. Oh, and because of this conference seems to have a minor specialty in it, I should mention I did spend a bunch of time in the commercial space business, and so there seems to be, we're finally getting an overlap between the two, so I think that's kind of cool.
Thank you, Michael.
Sure.
Tim?
Cool, thanks. Hi, I'm Tim Dodd. I'm the head of corporate development and strategy for Technicolor, based here in Los Angeles. Technicolor's been around for about 100 years. You probably know it as a company that invented color for film, so we still do that. We're very focused in VR and AR. We also have some other businesses that actually work pretty well with our ambitions in VR and AR. So we also are the second largest supplier in the world of cable set-top boxes and gateways. So we have a very large presence in-home with large customers in the US and worldwide, where we actually have a large footprint of in-home electronics and software capability that ties well with our kind of video presence. And we also own quite a lot of patents in color and sound and other ways that we can present VR and AR experiences. So our focus in VR to date has been really around kind of commercial B2B activity. We've done about 65 or 70 projects in VR currently to date, including just recently we did one with Fox on Aliens, which was really freaky and cool, but also kind of a neat way to tout the movie and have that as a kind of a pre-marketing role release for the movie. We've been looking at VR a lot as a precursor to AR. We see this as really what we're learning in VR. I think a lot of that will be adapted with some changes, but adapted and evolved into an AR space. Currently, we're happy with how we're seeing the VR B2B space evolve. We can talk later about the consumer space, but I think the AR opportunity is even more tantalizing for us, so we're really excited.
Thank you. And I agree with you. I think that AR and VR are not necessarily competitors, but actually complement each other in different roles. And they share a lot of the same production values and same challenges, more than you would imagine. So Tim, let's get started and talk about distribution partnering, because I believe that one of the exciting things is that AR is actually available now. The higher end AR is perhaps available in 2 to 3 years, but AR is already of use today, and there is a lot of opportunities that can be leveraged. So you are in charge of partnerships, and you have under your belt, you have the Experience Center and the Audio Lab, which audio is something that I often feel is forgotten in the mix and is so important. And you also have the titles, you have distribution, you have the set-top boxes. So how do you see the state of partnerships, or distribution opportunities from your experience with Technicolor and the things that you're
Sure.
doing?
Yeah. So you mentioned a few things, so I'll just unpack them a little bit. We have an experience center which we're about to open up actually in Culver City. That's really been part of an initiative for us to partner more closely with a number of different constituents in the ecosystem. So talent, producers, directors, visual effects artists who want to do things in VR and AR to come to our center and work with our people on projects. That's a fairly straightforward mission statement. Beyond that, though, we also have a very large research and innovation center that's based in France. We've moved the experts in color and light and sound who are really focused on VR and AR. We've moved a contingent of those people to LA, and they are now working with us in Culver City, developing technology around VR and AR. And then we also have, as you mentioned, partnerships. So we haven't announced partnerships yet. We're about to do that. We haven't really opened the center yet. It's under construction. It's opening in about, I'm not going to tell you exactly when, but in about 3 weeks. So the idea is that we're going to have partnerships with a number of different other providers in the ecosystem, hardware companies, chip manufacturers, distributors, and also game engine companies. Because we think game engine is a really important part of interactivity and really important part of VR and AR. So the idea is really to kind of bring that center together and use that as it's kind of a lab, it's kind of a project center. There's a motion capture studio there. There's a number of other ways we can use that center for projects and also for research and innovation. But really to try and get a kernel of expertise and experience in LA around VR and AR that we can all use. So that's the experience center, and that's kind of, I think, indicative of our view of partnerships. You know, we're looking for, obviously, we're a company, we're looking for commercial partnerships. But beyond that, we really want to extend and expand what we have in terms of content creation, content distribution, and part of that, of course, is also the technology that makes content look great on devices, so device management together in one place. In terms of what else we think is going to happen in AR, just very quickly, we really like what we've been seeing in VR. We're happy with some of the technology, but we think it could be a lot better. We come from a very high-end perspective. We own, we've worked with a lot of different studios, but we own The Mill and NPC, which are two of our favorite brands. Those companies are very, very high-end visual effects companies for graphics or images in either advertising or in film and TV. So, and they're also right beside the tech. So we're really kind of building out this high-end experience center with a view to kind of continue to push what we think. Obviously AR is going to be everywhere, both kind of low-end and mid-range, and high-end. Where we'll be focused is in that high-end for the moment.
All right. Thank you very much. And I'm glad that you mentioned the low and the high end, because the interesting thing about AR is that there's entirely different uses for entirely different markets and purposes. So clearly today, what you can leverage from a consumer perspective is mainly the mobile devices, but not only mobile devices, as we're going to learn a little later in this conversation. But Michael, just to follow up in sort of the same area, as AR gets introduced to mobile devices, do you have any advice or any tips that you can share in terms of people who own content or produce content on how partnering with technology companies may change from your experience as a business development leader?
Well, I guess I would say if you've got something, the first thing I would say is if you have some content that you want to create an AR experience with, know why you're doing it, and not just doing it because AR is the next cool thing. We see the numbers, we know, we believe that this is going to be a really powerful medium to do all sorts of different things, whether it's in entertainment or in education or training or anywhere. But know why this thing should be an AR device or an AR experience rather than just kind of porting it in. So I think that's the first thing. Like, what is the reason that this becomes a really compelling experience that you can't do with any other kind of device? And if you have something that really becomes a powerful experience in this kind of world of AR, then chances are pretty good that it's going to showcase some kind of technology that's going to be needed to make it happen. And that's when the opportunity for partnerships really comes up, is when because the tech companies are out there saying, all right, we have this cool tool, we need to show the people of the world how this tool works and drive more demand for it. So once you have some kind of an experience that really leverages a certain type of technology, you have the opportunity to make something happen. And I like what you were saying about about the kind of the lower end and the higher end, because we tend to think that coming from Magic Leap, we were always like, that's like the Cadillac side of AR, and it is a device that will be on your head with fantastic optics, and every kind of bell and whistle is going to be in there, and that's what we think of as AR. But AR exists today in all sorts of gradations. We've got one right there. There's the ODG device, but this is the most pervasive AR device on the planet right now. So there are ways to leverage a lot of these things.
It is true, and let's start moving, from the phone to some other things. So let's go to Tom all the way at the end. As part of Plantronics, one of the things that I think is often forgotten with augmented reality is audio. Audio is an element that brings so much to any interactive experience as well as a linear experience. Without audio, no scene could ever possibly be the same or convey the same feelings that you can get. So from the Plantronics perspective, and we're talking a little bit about this, how do you see audio progressing on augmented reality, or how does Plantronics looked at it?
Sure. So to some extent, we try to predict the future and what's going to happen. But for the most part, I kind of look just around us and today. And so how do humans relate, right? Earlier, Bill and Mike came up and sat at the table, and we talked. And there was some gesturing involved, and maybe we shared a screen at one point. But it's a very natural human experience, and we do that all the day. Our relationship with technology is probably going to be the same. So sure, your eyes are incredibly important, right? The amount of information that you can process at one time is huge. But audio is great for communicating with the world. It's a more discrete form factor. So if you're just walking around and you don't want something on your head, I think we'd really limit ourselves if we thought of VR or AR as something we go do. Like, I'm going to sit down now and go do AR. It's more a little bit like, I don't know, we talked about Pokemon Go as an example, where what is that? Is it content? It kind of is. There's content in there. It's kind of a game, but you could quickly imagine, kind of extrapolate that to just life Pokemon Go. Like, I'm sure if we talk later at dinner or at the bar, there are at least 5-10 people that we have something in common, we worked at the same company, interested in the same thing, but it's hard to pick those people out. Imagine bubbles over your head, or a little whisper in your ear saying, oh, that's that person you met at this other conference. Or, getting your Uber. Which Uber is yours? Well, I can look at the license plate on my phone and do that. Or there could just be a big bubble over the car that says it's my Uber, right? So how do we make the best, start with the human and make the most natural user experience?
Thank you, Tom. So let's talk about, sometimes we tend to think that when you talk about head-mounted displays, a generic name for anything you put on your head, or eyewear, that is something that is in the future, still years before we're going to get them. But that is not actually true. So Eric, you're in the market from Epson already selling products that are, as you mentioned, I think a moment ago, you can buy it right now on Amazon this instant if you wanted to. So let's talk a little bit about the HMDs or eyewear that is available to everyone already in the market, and how you view the progression of those devices reaching larger numbers.
Yeah, absolutely. So in the augmented reality space, I think everyone has really bought into the vision of 3 to 5 years out, we're going to be able to render digital content everywhere and really kind of revolutionize gaming and storytelling in general. So Epson, we definitely see that as the path, and we're bought into that. However, I think one thing that really differentiates us is that we're also looking to build a real business today and real solutions today for the entertainment industry. So I'll focus on 2 use cases that are actually being kind of where our glasses are being widely used and adopted in the kind of film production industry. The first is for drone pilots. So obviously, aerial photography and videography is really, taking off, pardon the pun, in the entertainment space. So our glasses actually allow pilots to keep visual line of sight with the aircraft, as well as see all their key telemetry data, see what the aircraft sees. And it's actually an FAA guideline that pilots must now keep visual line of sight with their aircraft. Epson, we also did sign a strategic development deal with DJI, the largest drone company in the world, to actually bring augmented reality to the skies. So one of the technical limitations of AR headsets today is field of view, which is kind of the digital overlay area. But however, when you're working with drones and you're flying those things thousands of feet out, that becomes less of an issue. So that's definitely one of the areas where we're getting a lot of traction today in terms of sales. The other that represents a big opportunity for Hollywood, I think, to really increase how they're able to monetize their content is for audiences to actually wear the AR glasses, in theater. So we have a partner called HANA Caption who offers up a solution that allows moviegoers to actually have real-time translations at the theater. So imagine, the day that a new film comes out, not only being able to market that film just to English speakers, but being able to market that film to people who speak Spanish, Mandarin, for instance, and you can draw from a much wider audience base and do that real-time translation. Additionally, from an accessibility standpoint, Brazil has enacted kind of a new regulation where I think it's 1% to 2% of their population is actually hearing impaired, which is very high relative to a lot of other countries. For there to be someone or some way to have sign language for theaters. So the glasses, we have a solution with our partner at HANA to be able to do kind of real-time sign language. So both of those, or I guess the in-theater ones, really represent kind of an opportunity for theaters to drive more revenue at the box office by being able to cater to kind of a larger audience through real-time translation in theaters. But those are some of the applications relevant to entertainment that we're attacking today.
Thank you, Eric. And I think that's really interesting to bring sign language to the glasses. That's really amazing. So now, Mike, I have known Daiquiri for a long time and love what you guys have been doing through the years. And you have been focused on the enterprise side, on market, in industrial use and business use. But you also have smart glasses now too. So I was hoping that you can tell us a little bit of what is the latest about the smart helmet. Is it available now, and what are your plans for the smart glasses?
Yeah, the smart helmet's been available since November of last year. It's a developer edition. We'll have full certification on it in the beginning of July.
And that's OSHA, right?
Yep, that's OSHA ANSI certification.
Okay.
So that you can deploy it on the factory floor. You can use it in a wide variety of different environments. Really, I think, exciting. We've got about 200 companies that are working with the product already. In various sets of scale and pilots. We announced the smart glasses at CES this year. CES was kind of a particular target because the glasses have a much bigger TAM. The idea there is that you can use it at a lean manufacturing work cell. You can use it in the back of the house for design. You can, because it has a Type 3C cable, you can plug it into laptops and other workstations, in addition to plugging it into a mobile puck that you can take with you. So it opens up a much wider range of workflows and a broader target audience.
Thank you. So as you guys can see, there is a lot of opportunities, and these are not just the only items available. As we mentioned, HoloLens is available. Of course, it's not really at a consumer price, but it's available and provides a rich experience. folks at MetaVision with the Meta 2 are also making strides, trying to solve some of the problems that are still, challenges for AR. And you have ODG, and you have, Avigant and Athier and a few others. So there are a few hands of, there's a few, like a couple dozen companies that are focusing here, which is actually a small amount of companies when you realize that this is worldwide and you compare it to other industries where hundreds of thousands of companies compete for the same thing. So let's talk a little bit about content, because I know that content is really important for a lot of the people in the audience, whether you're creating it or distributing it or publishing. And so how do you take advantage from AR, or how do you further your brand by using AR perhaps today? Let's talk a little bit about that, and I'll ask this to the entire panel, but I'll start with you, Tim, because you're nearest to me. So
Easy,
how
okay.
what tips or suggestions do you have for people who own or are creating content, and how they might be able to leverage AR based on some of the experiences and products that you have already created?
Sure. I mean, I think it's the vertical you're creating for is pretty important here. I think that we look at the vertical that we have traditionally been in, which is media and entertainment, as a fairly significant part of what's happening in VR, but it's likely to be a much less significant part of AR. I think that there's actually going to be a lot greater uptake in enterprise solutions such as real estate, hospitality, mobility, and those to us are actually almost more exciting. We like where we're at in kind of our media entertainment space, but frankly, to broaden out from that and look at kind of where content and AR will be distributed, we think it's going to be in these other verticals in a much more meaningful way. And there's lots of stats and charts you can look at, but the overall number is about $125 to $135 billion, worldwide in AR by 2025. Most of that's going to be driven by these other verticals, and a lot of that's going to be enterprise space, B2B stuff. A lot of it will be in reality that currently is not being augmented. So, how do you book a travel? How do you book your vacation? How do you do things when you're looking at real estate? You kind of go to a place and you guess and you hope it's going to be good, or you go to the house you want to buy and you look around. That's kind of like a baseline reality. How to augment that and how to make that look great is where I think a mix of the people in this panel will come in, and lots of other companies as well, but you've kind of got a good representation here. So the distribution side of content, I think, is going to be driven first off by which vertical you're in. And so for us, we're very excited, as I mentioned, about the possibilities, but a lot of that, we're going to be looking for the high end of different spaces, including hospitality, including mobility, including real estate.
Okay, Tom, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, it's just that was one of the things that actually perplexed me with this show is we come from the enterprise space, right, and communications and meetings and all this stuff. How do we relate to content providers, right, in Hollywood and all that? And oddly enough, my son sent me a link to a blog yesterday called "Everything is Narrative, Narrative is Everything." And Snapchat gets this, Facebook, your story, they're starting to understand that your day is a narrative. And the person in the enterprise is a narrative. The person buying a house is a narrative of how they bought the house. And how do you tell that story with all this content in a much more dynamic way? It's really fascinating. But I think that's what brings it together.
I agree. Now, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So a couple things. One is I think when you're talking about entertainment, first of all, the AR is a really interesting thing because it's not just a new way to tell a story. It is also kind of a whole new set of experiences. So you don't necessarily go, all right, in the past, if you're pitching a movie, it's like, here's the idea, here's the plot, here's how this goes forward. But here, you may have a narrative story like that, and you may also just have some sort of technical capability to do something that creates community or some sort of shared experience or some sort of an immersive experience. So it really depends also on what you're trying to achieve, and and who you are, and what you're trying to. More of what Tim said. It's what is your vertical. I think in the entertainment area, kind of past experience tells me that if you're creating an entertainment experience right now for AR, you're talking to the marketing department. There will come a point where you'll be able to create an AR experience, and you'll be able to monetize it in some way, like a movie or something like that. But for the moment, the money that's being spent in the entertainment industry on this is by companies that are wanting to get you to go to their movie or see their television show or whatever it is. And so they're providing you a cutting edge way to experience something that they're working on. So a lot of, I think, in the entertainment area, you're looking at innovative ways to assist in marketing at the very beginning before you get going any further.
I completely concur. At Epson, we've had the most success in terms of AR, exposing consumers to AR experiences through what we internally call a B2B2C sale, where we sell the glasses to a business who then works with software integrators to create like the experience that the end consumers get to experience. So we've done big rollouts at some theme parks. We actually had a theme park rollout about 2 years ago in Japan for an AR shooter. We've done multiple museums kind of throughout Europe and the US. So a lot of kind of these curated types of experiences. So a lot of brand activation is going to be kind of the first place where consumers get exposed to AR technology, particularly glasses.
Okay, thank you. I think that's something interesting that is a common thread on everything that you guys have raised, and that I have been asked in other panels, is that sometimes we get asked, so what can I do with AR, or can I use AR? And it's like, well, it all starts with a use case. What is it that you want to do? So I would suggest, if you're interested in creating content or adding AR as part of your content, that you remember that chart, which I can provide you after the panel is over. I can give you a copy of the PowerPoint. But it is important to understand what is the use case, what you want users to do before you can design anything. And this is true probably for anything that we want to do, whether it's a game or a movie or anything else. Before I move from this slide, Mike, from an enterprise perspective, and sort of piggybacking on your thought about the glasses go to a company goes to the consumer, from the Acris experience, any uses or any additional information you can share with us?
Well, I think just to step back maybe a little bit, we think of AR as like a visual computing platform as opposed to a capability, right? You have to think about, at least I think about it, I sort of try to frame it in the same way I think about the way the internet was initiated, right? It was something that was a process tool or a productivity tool that then enabled all of these other potential experiences to be created. The way we consumed things then. When your entire world becomes that interactive experience as opposed to a 2D screen, you have to really step back and think, what is the value that I can create with that capability first? And that value, initially we believe starts in the enterprise. In general, they're more focused on process and value initially, not necessarily content, right? So how can I take that capability? How can I use that capability to create an ROI or a meaningful adjustment in the way I do things? They're just set up for that. Also, the barrier to entry for content in the enterprise is much lower. So you have an opportunity to take things that are from a technology standpoint, or maybe immature, or like I think of the AR industry right now as sort of a pimply-faced teenager, right? It's not quite mature enough yet to really for prime time. But it's getting there, and the enterprise is really that place where you'll see all of those mistakes made. You'll see that technology mature because investment can be made there, and it'll take a bit before we get to, I think, consumer adoption. Now, I'm sure the mobile phone companies would take umbrage to that, but I really think that you'll see value. Consumers the first place they'll see value in AR is in their automobile. You'll have a heads-up display in your automobile that will give you driving directions in three-dimensional space, and you'll go, wow, I get why I need AR. I think that's the difference when I think about content and how that content flow will happen. It's going to start with productivity and process first.
Okay.
Yeah, I just want to, I think for Technicolor, we see the same thing. VR and AR are still, and I'll use the terms together, are still fairly nascent. And while there's been some interesting stuff going on at the consumer level, most of what's driving what we would think of as the high-end, high-touch, actually kind of a really compelling image experience has been enterprise, whether it's been a marketing for a movie or it's been a marketing for a department store, which we've done a lot of in the UK recently, or a theme park. It's had two components. It's been enterprise focused, and it's primarily been location based. So whether we've done things in store where people have actually gone to a store and put on a box on their face, or they've looked at a store through a phone, it really has been something that we've triggered in the location. And those have been regarded, in kind of as a more compelling way to get things done from a consumer point of view, to carry a brand experience and convey the narrative that a brand wants to convey to their audience. And so for us, we kind of focus on those as kind of key learning elements for us in terms of when we're building a VR experience, what we look for in terms of potential success factors. The kind of pure kind of passion-driven mobile stuff that is consumer grade, we haven't seen anything yet that we think is really amazing. I have 4 young kids. They play Pokemon Go till their phones blew up, and it was cool. But that is not a high-end AR experience. While it's really compelling mass experience, it's not something that we would say is like really a deep AR experience. In VR, my household has a Vive in it. It's not used a great deal. The kids actually go to their phones a lot more. So, kind of picking up that this mass market trend is something that will still to come. But where we play, really focused on enterprise experiences for film and TV, and increasingly for brands and advertisers, we see this as kind of location-based, enterprise-focused.
I agree. Before we talk about market opportunities and focus on that, and there's a lot of them, one thing that I would say about best practices is if you want to use AR today, metaphorically speaking, think simple, but simple for the end user, not necessary for technology. If you look at the snapshot lenses, very easy to use from a consumer perspective, extremely hard technology to master and to use effectively. It is really hard not only to read a face and know that there's a face as opposed to the background, but when you're moving and tracking that is extremely difficult. So some things look simple and easy, but they're actually a tremendous achievement to get to work reliably. So there are interesting hidden things within some of the technology that we're seeing today. But I do agree with you, Tim, that in the mobile space, there hasn't been, like something that you go, oh my God, that's really interesting. And I think that that's part of why we all feel that we like to share technology and production expertise with you guys who create content or publish content, because to create that next super cool project or that fantastic use is going to require a combination of skills, and I think there's tremendous opportunity on that. So I want to talk for a moment about live events. A few months in New York, I met Megan Nelson from Superbright, and they did a very interesting use of AR for a fashion show. The fashion show, it only lasted, I think it was like 4.5 minutes or something like that. But it was an amazing use in that it really engaged the audience. 200 plus people were absolutely delighted, and they did not focus on the fact that it was a very short show. They actually focused on the richness and the engagement. And it'll be interesting to see in the coming months how that translates into sales, because What AR really brings to some other mediums is engagement, and how to really leverage that engagement depends on how clever we are or what ideas we have. But it is all possible and is being done. If you look it up on the web, you can see a video of the presentation. It's really interesting with low technology.
No, I think that's really cool. I think if you just look at your day, how much of your day is a live experience versus pre-created content, right? It's, I don't know, 90% somewhere up there, right? I think that the innovation really is going to be around augmenting your life, and not just giving you content.
So, so talking about market opportunities, and I don't know, Eric, if you want to get us started with this. You mentioned two use cases, the theaters, the sign language, couple, and the drones, which I think is really interesting. What other uses do you see up front from the feedback? Because I know you meet with clients or potential clients all the time. What feedback are you getting in terms of upcoming opportunities in the near term or midterm?
So those opportunities that I spoke to are mainly drone piloting, being able to keep line of sight with it and bring AR to the skies. If you think of the skies as a blank canvas, being able to paint that canvas digitally. So we, have partnered with a number of drone platforms, DJI in particular, but also on the software side to be able to bring AR to the skies. More about that will be announced shortly. Two, we mentioned using the glasses for live subtitling, translation, sign language or accessibility. And then the other big marketing opportunity that I mentioned earlier was what we call B2B2C. So theme parks, museums, brand activation or experience centers. I think those will be largely the three applications where users will be receiving their first experiences with AR glasses, at least in our opinion.
Thank you. And Tim, you mentioned also being more excited about some of the enterprise opportunities. And I'll come to you, Michael. I didn't miss you.
Okay.
What opportunities? Any thoughts?
Look, I think it's things I mentioned, but it's experiential for location-based is the means of conveying the current high-end experience. So if that's kind of how we see things. I think progressing. That will broaden out as more devices with higher functionality are more readily available to consumers. In terms of verticals that aren't being explored or are yet nascent, I think automotive is clearly, whether you're configuring a car that you want to buy, whether you're experiencing a car that you want to buy and you haven't bought yet, or whether you're actually in the car driving it. I think there's lots and lots of really interesting, compelling ways to think about augmenting that experience, that reality. Travel, experiential stuff generally, I think is huge. Whether you're conveying someone else's experience to yourself in VR is something that's been done today, but making that a little more immersive, I think, would be great. And then last, I think the whole notion of buying what for most of us is a pretty large purchase, which is your house, doing that in a more compelling way, and whether it's a house that doesn't exist yet and developing a house and building it and actually putting it on site in AR and VR would be really cool. So we're kind of focused on those areas. But again, for the moment, I think the high-end imagery that we're seeing is most compellingly done in a kind of a location-based context. And we're seeing a lot of that demand coming from the B2B2C space and enterprise space.
Thank you. You wanted to add something?
Sure. I mean, the crazy thing about augmented reality is that it's kind of everything. Like everywhere you look and everywhere you are, there's probably some data that might be useful to you there. So it kind of the possibilities over time as the technology develops just become limitless. At the moment, I think some of the low-hanging fruit are, I think anybody who's been in a company that has more than one location has had their issues with a Skype or Citrix video conferencing call. And if you can do that more immersively and and allow people from different branches to communicate with each other, to pass data back and forth, to kind of facilitate just intra-office or inter-office conference calling, you've done something that's a market that is ripe for exploitation, given the number of people who use some kind of video conferencing now. That's not necessarily revolutionary, but it is certainly evolutionary in a way that I think will make a difference to people. The healthcare field has a number of applications, whether it's from diagnostics to remote surgery to surgery where your doctor doesn't have to look up from the patient on the table to get the real-time data that he needs in a moment where he really needs it. There are just so many possible areas, and we haven't even talked about defense, which is a whole crazy field in its own.
Well, right, and interestingly, that defense is where it all started.
Right. Yeah.
But it's interesting what you were saying, Mike, about the use on the heads-up display on a car, because I wonder how many of you have been driving a car, perhaps a rental, and wonder where are the lights, or where is this, or how do you open this, or how you open that. Imagine, with a heads-up display, it's not just about directions, it's about a lot more. You'll have information to make it easy to access any feature of the car.
Yeah, I think just from a practical standpoint, as we move towards autonomous driving, there's really two keys to it. Is that windshield should be a screen, right? It should be an interactive screen. It will be an interactive screen. It's not practical to be looking down at your dashboard when you're driving 100 miles an hour. And in the long term, when we move to autonomous driving and you no longer need to focus on the road, you still need to communicate what the car is thinking to the user, to the passenger. And how do you do that? Do you do that on a screen where you're looking down, or do you augment the road in front of you and let the passenger know that the car is aware that there's a truck in front of you that's braking, or that there is a turn that's coming up and it's taking the right turn? Those are things that all the auto OEMs see as a very clear path, and there's a high demand for augmented reality in the vehicle. I think you'll see it. It'll take a couple years to get into market because the build cycles are so long on automobiles, but in the next 4 or 5 years, you'll see a significant number of cars on the road with augmented reality capabilities. Those capabilities, I think, will drive consumer adoption faster than a lot of the others. But back to your previous question, where the opportunities are, to me, there's kind of two interesting ones that I always think about and I always come back to. There are a lot of closet use cases that are really interesting that you could apply AR to and solve a problem. But two really basic ones, and they're sort of a branch of the same thing, is really around training and education. You learn so much better and so much faster with AR. That spatial depth, activating different parts of your brain. There's numerous studies that have been released that show that if you train somebody in AR, they make less mistakes, they learn significantly faster. It's amazing the depth that you can get to when you can apply that capability to something as simple as training, where people are watching videos now, or they're reading manuals, they're doing very little to really get their hands on and think in three-dimensional space. I think if I was a content maker looking for AR, I would be looking for training and educational opportunities first.
I agree ever so heartily. That's why we started with an educational product. Eric, you wanted
for
to
the
add
entrepreneurs in the audience, I would recommend a good place to, if you're looking to start kind of a new venture in the space and how to monetize getting into AR. The cost of content creation right now is very, very high, prohibitively high in a lot of use cases. So if you build a platform, if you have a platform to be able to help content creators create AR experiences, more effectively or cheaply, I think that's kind of where the next evolution is going to be. It's like content creation is, we just need more 3D kind of depth tracked content. So platforms that enable that more cheaply, it's definitely going to be needed.
I completely agree, because that's also our second product. I am not paying them, for the record.
Well, I would add, having spent a bit of time in that space, the game engine guys, I think, are doing an amazing job here. And I think that what we're seeing in terms of whether it's Amazon Lumberyard or Unreal or Unity, I don't have any We don't have any particular preference with all these companies and all their technology. The way we're seeing game engine and a mix of game engine and stuff that we're seeing being done in what would be more like traditional VFX rendering is amazing. So we've just done a couple of studies with one of these companies where we took what was essentially about 100,000 hours of render farm time, which is several $1 million, give or take, and did this in about 43 milliseconds using a game engine. So you can actually do stuff live in real time if you have enough gigaflops and you have enough processing power behind you with current technology in a game engine, which is incredible. So we've really focused and I won't disagree with kind of the entrepreneurial bent of going after that space. I do think the game engine is a terrifically interesting pathway to get to two things, better, faster, higher end, but also probably a mass market distribution platform.
I agree, and interestingly enough, and agreeing with you again, is that producing quantity, high quality content, is still really expensive. Producing 3D linear pieces is expensive. Shooting video is expensive. Sometimes, unless you're my kids who do it for free. And so there are challenges, but there are the same challenges we always face. It's interesting that AR by itself is not necessarily expensive, depending on how you want to use it. Your content might be. So and because we want to leave a few minutes for the audience for questions, let's do a little round of the near future. And I will ask an open question to all of you. What are the challenges or the opportunities that you see in the very near future? And I see Tom enthusiastically waving his hands. So we'll start with Tom at the very end. But I'd love to get a take from each one of you before we go to the audience.
Oh, okay.
We're yours.
So one thing I've been thinking about recently, it's a little off the wall, but about what's coming is our languages that are spoken were designed a long, long time ago, and innovation is discouraged, whether it's like Zeph in South Africa or Pidgin English or Valley, a long time ago. And I think there's need for innovation. They were designed for talking to people. As we talk to the world around us, I find it very challenging to explain to Siri what I want to have happen and stuff. And one thing really cool about Hollywood has been made-up languages. And if you all know anyone who's like interested in innovation in language and creating maybe boutique languages or product-specific languages or experience-specific languages, I would love to get in contact with that.
Okay. I think that one of the near future really interesting things is going to be in communication. Because we have all probably seen those videos about the conference call and how interesting is people dropping, the dog barking, and et cetera, et cetera. But think about with AR, communication is going to be, and with volumetric holograms, we're basically going to be like standing next to each other. You can walk around the person. So I think that's, for me, that's part of like the near future interesting part.
I would
Eric.
say the challenge I see near term is creating natural user interfaces. Everything I've played with, when you play with digital holograms and click on and different things, it just feels awkward and strange at best. So I think, really refining that is going to be a challenge and a fun challenge.
It's always the challenge, to go from one medium to another and try not to replicate the same interface. How do you see that, Mike?
Yeah, I think we remain very open on it, right? I don't think that it's not going to be gesture, it's not going to be voice, it's not going to be some device that you hold. It's going to be all of them, and a combination of all of them, and it'll evolve into whatever's natural. So if you've got a product or a platform and you start to restrict, or you bet on one thing, you're going to end up pigeonholed, and the number of use cases and exposure to the market is going to be much narrower. I don't like the big gesture stuff at all personally. It's great for films when you see it on TV and stuff like that, but it's not really a good practical use. But that doesn't mean that there isn't a place for certain actions or things that you want to do if you've built a game or you've built something where a broad gesture would be useful. I think the vast majority of inputs are going to be the simple ones, the ones that we use now. I think the mouse has taught us a lot about inputs into computers. I think simple input devices that are like that will be part of every AR system eventually. But I also think that there will be an integration of voice, especially as AI picks up and becomes much more useful. That they're able to solve bigger problem spaces.
Okay. Michael or Tim, any parting thoughts?
Sure. I mean, one of the things I was thinking about as we're talking about this is actually inspired by a couple folks in the back of the room who don't know I'm talking about them. But one of the things that I see that's a challenge right now is that you have different platforms that aren't talking to each other. There's ODG and there's Epson and there's the Daiquiri helmet and so everybody is creating for their own platform, and that platform has a limited amount of people who can use it. So the trick, and something that that I think is being solved right now is to create a platform where people come with their own native devices and they can all talk to each other. And you can have people with various different
Okay.
hardware. So.
Thank you. Tim, you want to add something before we go to the audience?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'd assert actually that most of what you need at an entrepreneurial level, since we were talking about that before, to create a compelling AR platform and business is already existing. So we have a digital map or overlay of the physical world that's fairly commonly available. We have phones with compute power that will actually power a fairly decent, or if not rudimentary, but decent AR experience, and those are widely distributed. And I'll disagree with everybody. I actually think 3D objects and content is not that difficult to create.
I would totally.
So from our point of view, I think that there are a lot of, I would say actually there is enough to pull that together from an entrepreneurial point of view to build a compelling AR business today. What is missing, I think, to your point actually, is a software OS and platform play that allows us to build those things together. Right now, this is kind of like the cell phone market pre-iPhone and pre-Android. It's kind of, we've got a number of competing OS platforms, a number of different distribution plays, a number of different devices that aren't really talking to each other. While I don't endorse kind of any monopoly approach, I think that we need to actually understand how to get those platforms working together and better integrated.
I completely agree, and it's all part of the process. So we have a couple minutes for questions from the audience, and I want you to know that we have included a lot of different links that can be interesting for you if you're interested in AR. And if you drop your card at the end of this panel, I'll be happy to share it with you. So we'll start with you, and then we'll go to you.
Following, I think, a little bit in the last round, I'm wondering, notwithstanding the bad experience we had with Google Glass, that we have these ubiquitous kind of dominant platforms, Google, Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, that have voice, that have other functions that consumers have already bought into. Isn't that the likeliest outgrowth, and do you see evidence that these major players are embracing AR as an element of the ubiquitous platform you're talking about?
Sure. I mean, Microsoft already in the game and trying to be in it in a couple different varieties. I think most people think Apple is going to be doing something large. We don't necessarily know what it is. Google has invested in Magic Leap, and they've got their own division doing so. Everybody is looking at this.
Yeah, they're all doing it. Apple bought Metaio, Google invested in Magic Leap, and Project Tango. Microsoft has a HoloLens. They're all trying and jockeying for a position. Let's go to you.
I guess how much of the value creation will be reliant on somebody like AWS or Google to provide a service platform? Like if AWS really opens out to create content, it seems to me then you can create a lot of value with that. But without something like that, it's going to be really tough in that space to create the ultimate potential value if all we have is the hardware and not really a unified place to create the content or a way to create things like that.
Yeah, I think, look, AWS from an infrastructure platform is already being used for most everything that we're doing or looking at. And I don't mean just AWS, but other cloud providers as well, so people like that. I think in terms of content creation, we're experimenting with ways to build heavy visual effects movies using a VR camera lens system that really makes the director's head the camera, which saves a huge amounts of time and energy. It allows us to get the best creative. But yeah, I think without some common infrastructure play, and it doesn't have to be one company, but at least an understanding about where the stuff is in the cloud and where it can come from, it's going to be tough to imagine that we will let lots and lots of small companies or mid-sized companies develop compelling AR content. I don't think it's a huge problem in the long run. I think that, again, what we're seeing in game engine technology is such that we're really encouraged by the development of 3D object rendering in real time, and that will allow us to do lots of things just on a phone that will seem kind of incredible based on what we have today in a few years. So yeah, I agree, but I kind of don't know if it's a major stumbling block. I think it's something that will just get smoothed out on the way through.
Yeah, it's actually, you have to think about AWS and similar technologies. It's basically like a commodity. We all use it. Most of the CDNs that are of any consequence in the world use AWS. Small developers use AWS, and there's a few others, and the largest companies use them too. So it's more like a commodity. If that ever became a problem, somebody else will set up another cloud-based cluster of servers and problem solve. So that's something that that is an advantage for us. Indeed, you cannot create rich and complex experiences in AR or VR without a cloud-based system, because your phone doesn't have the processing power or by itself to do something that requires like thousands of calculations, etc. So the cloud is going to be a key component. We have time for one more question before I get that signal that I have to go. Ariela.
I was wondering if you would share with us your best example of an AR experience that's available out there today. So not hardware, but an AR use case, an AR piece of software, an AR piece of content that you think represents really where we're going, and something that all of us should see.
Anyone? Anyone?
I'm picking off the wall, kind of your simple thing of Zillow, in a way, is augmented reality. I like driving around, especially kind of in this neighborhood, and seeing like, what the heck is that one? And it's fun. It's, I don't know, stupid simple example, but anything can kind of be considered augmented reality as long as it's extending your view of the world.
Next time you're out at the Leaning Tower of Pisa, we've got like a really cool AR tour that actually will give you lots of different details and 3D overlays of kind of in different stories. I feel like it was really, it's the content that drives that experience, but it was executed really well. I'd recommend checking out the Moverio tour at the Leaning Tower of Pisa if you're ever out there.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your time. We really appreciate it, and thanks to our panel. Thank you, guys.